An Airbnb host in North Carolina found out a hard lesson about landlord-tenant law after their short-term rental guest ended up becoming a long-term tenant and had to be evicted. I'm Tony, and this is Real Estate Investing and Landlord News. All right, so I have an interesting story for you today, and it's coming out of North Carolina. So I want to talk a little bit about Airbnb. And so a lot of these Airbnb people, the people who own Airbnbs, the short-term rentals, they are saying, hey, I'm a host, I'm not a landlord. Well, when it comes to the difference between a host and a landlord, a lot of the times it is how long you have a tenancy agreement with your client or whatever, right? So in some states, if a person stays in your unit, your house, condo, apartment, whatever, for longer than 1 month, then they become a tenant and have to be removed by the civil eviction process, right? And so this is an important thing to keep in mind when you are operating a short-term rental business, because if you have to get somebody up out of there, guess what? You have to go through the same civil eviction process as other landlords at that point, okay? So the best thing, the best course of action would be to not have any tenant able to stay in your unit for longer than 1 month. But that is exactly what the person in this story did, okay? They allowed their tenant or their host, I guess, their Airbnb guest, I guess I should say, to stay in the unit for much longer than a month, and now they're having to evict them. So yeah, it's an important lesson to learn. It's an interesting story. I feel bad for them nonetheless, because simply put, freeloader is a freeloader. Okay, somebody trying to take something for nothing, that is what I have a problem with. So before I get into the article, go ahead, hit the like, subscribe button, maybe leave a comment down below and let me know what you think. To those of you who operate Airbnbs on here, how long is the longest amount of time that you allow your guests to stay in one of your units, okay? And what does your state law say about the difference between a tenant and a guest in terms of how easy it is to remove them? Okay, I'm just curious what the people on here have to say about the whole situation. Anyway, let me get into the story. They go into a little bit of the details, and I'll tell you what I think as we go through it. This article is coming from foxbusiness.com, and it says, Airbnb renters turned squatters refuse to vacate property unless evicted. Court docs. Airbnb warns hosts that rental agreements longer than a month could give guests tenant rights. Yeah, okay, easily. These people could take advantage of the situation, all right? So let's get into the article and see what it says. An Airbnb host in Durham, North Carolina filed a complaint in court against renters turned squatters after they refused to vacate the property until they received an order of eviction, according to court documents. The documents, obtained by Fox News Digital, show the current guests agreed to pay the host, Farzana Rahman, $1,900 per month from October 25th of 2023 to May 25th of 2024 to stay in a condominium on Chimney Ridge in Durham. So to me, this doesn't really sound like a typical short-term rental. This sounds kind of like a mid-term rental, okay? Longer than a month, but shorter than like an annual, a yearly lease like you would see for a regular tenant, right? But here's the question. I've always wondered this because, for a while there was this big thing about people, we're going to get these traveling nurses and we're going to get these people traveling for business and they're going to let them stay in our place for a few months, right? But then get the place back. So I've always wondered what would happen if this, became an issue with one of these tenants, right? Or with one of these guests. So yeah, obviously the law seems to look at you as a landlord and not as like a hotel at that point in time, because they've been there for so long. I've even heard some cases where literal hotels that allowed tenants to stay longer than X amount of time have had to basically say, okay, well, we're no longer a hotel. This is like an apartment and we have to go through an eviction process for a hotel room. Okay, literal hotels. So this isn't limited to Airbnb. This is a cautionary tale because this could literally happen to you anywhere. But after May 25th, the guests refused to leave the condominium. Rahman told a local ABC station that her cleaning person went to the property and noticed the renters were still inside. They answered the door and they said, "No, we haven't moved out." She, the cleaner, said, "Should I come back tomorrow?" And they said, "No, don't come back," Rahman said. In court documents, Rahman says she contacted the Durham Police Department on May 28th, which resulted in 2 officers being dispatched to the rental property. The officers reportedly spoke with a man at the property who was not the primary renter or named in the complaint, who said he would not leave. So yeah, sounds like police aren't going to do anything. Okay, not surprising, not surprising. This is exactly what I'm talking about, where we have people who are essentially trespassing and police refuse to do anything. They refuse to press charges. They refuse to remove the people. They refuse to even ask the people to leave. That would be nice if they just say, "Hey, will you just get the heck out of here?" You know, but no. Instead, they're seen as, I mean, it's like we are seen as the aggressor in these whole situations, which is why they force us to go through the civil eviction process. So yeah, I mean, I feel for the Airbnb, the short-term rental host, but let me say here that this is nature of the business, right? Now, here is something that I don't really think about, or I don't really talk about a lot when I talk about why I don't like short-term rental guests in a lot of cases, because you can't do the same thorough background investigation on an Airbnb guest that you can on a long-term rental tenant, okay? So, like, you know generally who's going to be staying in your unit, but did you run a criminal background check on these people? Did you run a credit history on these people? Did you do income verification on these people? You know, call up their employer. Do you know that they make 3 times the monthly income? You know what I'm saying? So 3 times the monthly rent and income, I mean. So, you know, like when you put a long-term tenant into your property, you're doing a much more thorough background investigation compared to somebody who is putting a short-term rental guest or even a mid-term rental guest up into your unit, right? You're more concerned with, when you're putting that short-term guest in there, can they best pay me the money for this little short period of time? You're not concerned with, well, you know, will this person be able to pay over the long term? And in the case of these people here, it sounds like they couldn't pay over the long term. They might have had other things in their history that said, hey, this is not the kind of person you want up in your unit. And, you know, for a long-term rental, I wouldn't have rented to them, okay? But obviously, this is how people slip through the cracks. This is how people end up getting taken advantage of, because, you know, these people, they know how to play the game. They know how to play the game, and now you're going through the eviction process just like I would if I owned my long-term rental and I had a bad tenant in there who stopped paying rent. Airbnb, Rahman said, would not provide information about the guests to the owner, and the company instructed her to file a complaint with the local authorities to force the guests to vacate. Rahman also noted that she had not been able to enter her property to assess the damages, though standing in the doorway, she reported a strong odor of tobacco and marijuana from inside. The situation has affected Rahman's ability to host future guests, she said in the filing. And that's very true, right? Because now all of your future guests who you had that were supposed to stay in there, they're not going to be able to pay you. And this is the same situation that a landlord would be in, right? A future tenant can't pay you, or a tenant who can pay you rent we're unable to get them up in your unit so that you can start getting paid again. So you're not just taking the loss that the person owes you, but you're also taking, you know, going into the future losses as well. So yeah, this is a bad situation. Something to think about when you are thinking about investing in Airbnb. You know, like, you don't truly get to vet who is going up in your property. Okay, so who is going up in your property? That's a good question a lot of the times, and I guess in this case, this host is finding out that it wasn't the best person.